how to address an envelope. You see, it's important that you address things properly, or they don't go where you need them to go. I'm going to need all the tools of the trade. My eyeglasses, a pen or pencil or a computer, an envelope, and a pair of addresses. The reason we write letters has to do with the fact that it's a skill that translates really well to writing important emails and documents that we use on an everyday basis as adults in the job setting, in the work world. Letters really fall into two kinds of categories. First is the business letter, which is what I'm going to be teaching you, both the format and different types. We also have the personal letter, and those could be letters that you write to loved ones, to family, to friends, or pen pals. So, back to the business letter. Generally speaking, the business letter is about 3, maybe 4 paragraphs long. It's generally meant to be read on 1 page, maybe 2 pages, and that's about it. The different types of business letter include the cover letter. These are letters that are written with alongside of resume for a job. It's written with your potential employer in mind. It's in order to get that job interview. And really in this letter, you are demonstrating, you're selling yourself as an asset to the employer. You want to share with the employer the skills and experience that you have that make you the perfect candidate for the job. You're trying to get to this stage where you are in an interview with a potential employer. The letter of introduction is what you are doing with me. And that is a formal letter, and you're introducing yourself to someone who's effectively a stranger. It's usually written to explain who you are to someone in authority, and this could be for school, like this assignment. It could be for a job where you may have to travel to another place, or perhaps even for a relative that you've never seen. You could include things like perhaps, how you might look. Maybe you're wearing a long black outfit with a strange helmet, and you need to help people identify you when you arrive at the airport, kind of like this guy right here. Next would be a letter of inquiry, and this is done more if you're, say, a private investigator or a journalist and you're trying to access information that you can't normally get on the internet, or you're asking someone for some data that they specialize in. Say you're researching a disease and you need to go and look up the records of a particular hospital. Okay, so you go and you ask someone like this to go and pull out all the files and see if you can get some information from them. Next would be a letter of complaint. And this is generally a formal letter complaining to a person or an organization or a company about something specific, often to a government. It's usually about a product or a rule being broken or neglected. And usually a letter of complaint is done to establish what's called a paper trail. And that's to make sure that if you really need to press the issue, make things move forward, you have this established record of things that you've complained about. Something like a pothole in the road in front of your house, you want to make sure that it gets filled so it doesn't wreck your vehicles as you drive. You would maybe lodge a complaint with the city to see if they can fix it up. Another might be a broken toy or a broken order, or something goes wrong, say like with Amazon, and you or a company that's selling through Amazon, and you want to return it, or you want to complain about something that has happened. So you could write a letter to go ahead and do so. The next would be a letter of reference. This is also known as a to whom it may concern letter. It's usually where you speak well about someone else and you talk about how they do indeed have the experience, achievements, and qualities they have for the job. A letter of reference is basically a great big thumbs up. Next is a letter to the editor. Now, we don't do this as much because we don't read physical newspapers or magazines, but there are often sections on a news website, including places like the CalgaryHerald.com, where you can respond about a particular article or a particular event or a particular thing that happened in politics, and you can express your opinion. Usually there's a section set aside that if the people who write the news website or magazine will go and put up your letter, and if it's particularly well written. Basically, if you find something wrong on the internet, you could probably write about it and see if you can get into a comment section of some kind. Now, next is a letter to a government official. And this is a letter written typically about a topic. It's usually in the form of, say, a petition or a request, and you're asking them to do something about an issue or a policy. So the business letter format itself really breaks into two parts.
The first part is the envelope, then we have the addressing inside of the actual letter itself, and that consists of the heading, the inside address. Then we get into the salutation, and then the actual body of the letter, and then finally the closing. We're going to be following the Canada Post addressing guidelines, or which is the basic same thing as the Alberta Grade 9 ELA PAT format. One thing to know, some letters involve the post office box number or some addresses. And this comes from the fact that many people in the country in rural areas don't actually have street addresses. The postal truck doesn't drive from farm to farm or from acreage to acreage. They collect their mail at a post office and with a box that has a number. Many companies do this in the city as well in order to have a separate mailing address from their actual physical address where people go to work. So this is what you might have seen if you've gone to Shoppers Drug Mart or to post something at Canada Post. There will often be a wall with a bunch of post office boxes. Now, let's talk about the envelope. You're going to have two addresses, your own and to the person to whom you're writing. And you're going to see just a tiny little video of basically Mr. Bird doing this, and I'm writing to Bernie Verum, my principal, and we're going to be following the Grade 9 PAT guidelines or the Canada Post format. So on the envelope, you can see kind of in that green area, there's the return address, that's your address, and then you have the destination address zone, that is the person you're writing to, and in the top right corner, you have the stamp area. It's basically kind of looks like this. So in the return address, you have your first name, last name, street address, or postal office box number, the city, province, and postal code. Now there are some rules. The first rule is that you are supposed to use all caps or block lettering. Next is you want to use a two-letter province abbreviation, AB, for Alberta. Next is that you put 2 spaces between the province and the postal code, or a gap, so it's easy to understand where the postal code begins.
For my city, L0B0.
All right, next about the person that you are addressing to, the person you're addressing your letter to. You also use their first name and their last name, then the title that they have, then the organization or company that they belong to, followed by the street address or post office box number, and then the city, province, and postal code. So here's an example with Jane Lane, the manager of Jane's Flowers, that's the title and organization. And you can see here, one thing is I have put in a suite number, so 9, and then you follow it by the dash, and then the street number, so 9-1223 Bridlewood Avenue Southwest. And this also counts if it's an apartment number, or a condo number, or bay number, or a suite number.
Why not write to our principal? You want to fix that to the top right hand corner, which I did so rather crookedly, and as it turns out, upside down. And then there you are.
Okay, once you actually get into the business letter itself, it does consist of the following in order. You have the heading, then the inside address, salutation, the body of the letter, the closing, the signature, and the printed name. Okay, one quick note, I am using the most common format here, and that's block format, and there is no indentations, and all of the elements in the business letter line up along the same margin. So the elements look like this. There's the heading, the inside address, salutation, your body paragraphs, closing, the signature, then your printed name. And you can see that's all kind of in a block format. There's no indentation, and it's all to the left-hand side. It's left justified. Okay, so the heading is the address and the date. Now, these things that you need to realize, they're in regular writing. You're not using all caps or block lettering like you would have in the envelope. You're using regular writing. Okay, if you're addressing to a city, you put in the street address, then the city, province, postal code, and then the date. And then, of course, if it's a company, PO box number, or a rural area, It's the post office box number, city, province, postal code, and the date. So here's a few examples with 2 addresses from Toronto. There are 3 lines, and we're starting with a post office box number example, PO Box 123, followed by Arrowwood, Alberta, T0L0B0, and then the date, September 30th, 2020. Next, we have the inside address. This consists of the name and address of the person to whom you're writing. It usually appears 4 lines below the heading if a word processor is used. So basically, if Google Docs or document or Word is used, one of the or just 1 line below if it's written by hand. Okay, and it follows the same format as the mailing address on the envelope. That's first name, last name, then the title, organization, street address, city, province, and postal code. Okay, so you do the first name, last name, then the title, principal, name of the organization, street address, and include the quadrant, and then the city, province, and postal code. Then we have the salutation, and the most traditional salutation or greeting for a business letter is Dear, and then it's followed by Mr. or Miss or Mrs. or Miss, and then the person's last name followed by a colon, not a comma, a colon. Then we have the body. The body is the main part of the letter in which you write what you have to say to the addressee. And you skip, of course, 1 line after the salutation, and you make sure you separate each paragraph by 1 line. You want to make sure that you're concise and not too wordy. Make sure you give enough information so that your reader can understand your request. Now, business letters are typically formal, so the language that you use should also be formal. You want to make sure you don't use contractions. That's where you use don't. You use do not instead of don't, or cannot instead of can't. And you want to be careful with familiar speech, because you are generally writing to someone that you're not familiar with, someone who might be a stranger. Okay, and then of course, just a reminder, you have the introduction, your argument, or your body, which is when you're kind of really making your points, and then your call to action paragraphs. So at the very least, it's 3 paragraphs. Now, the call to action, that's generally where you're asking the person that you're writing to do something for you. In a letter of introduction, there's generally not a call to action unless you're asking them to contact you by some way, and you're giving information that so they can contact you, whether it's an email or a phone number. Let's get to the closing. The closing is the ending to your letter. It appears at the bottom of the letter directly underneath the body. Again, it's separated by 1 line, and only the first word in the closing should be capitalized. It's always followed by a comma. In a formal letter, there's 2 options for closing, and that's sincerely or yours truly. Then you have your signature, and the signature is your full name signed. Your signature should always appear directly below the closing, and again, separated by what appears to be 1 line. It should, if possible, always be in ink. Now, sometimes it's impossible to sign your name if you're submitting something electronically. If you're in this position, you want to use a cursive font or italics. Make sure you add a space or empty line between the closing and the signature so you can actually write it. The last thing you want to do is print your name. Make sure that it's the same font and size as your body, of course. And that's it. You've finished writing the business letter.